A cold December evening in New York City took a shocking turn when a ragged, shivering child shouted, "Don't eat that!" at none other than Hollywood's beloved star Keanu Reeves. The unexpected encounter unraveled a chain of heart-stopping events, uncovering secrets, kindness, and a bond that would change both their lives forever. But as the story unfolds, an even deeper truth emerges, one no one saw coming. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. It was December 15th, 2017, a Friday. The streets of Manhattan were alive with the usual hustle and bustle of tourists, honking cabs, and hurried footsteps crunching on snow-speckled sidewalks. The Rockefeller Christmas tree sparkled in the distance, its glow casting a festive warmth that seemed at odds with the bone-chilling air. Among the crowd, Keanu Reeves walked quietly, bundled in a simple coat, scarf, and a pair of worn boots that spoke to his unpretentious nature. For most, he was just another face in the sea of holiday shoppers, and that's the way he liked it. Keanu had just picked up a hot dog from a street vendor when the voice pierced the air, a child's voice, high-pitched and panicked. "Don't eat that!" It was so sudden, so full of urgency, that Keanu froze mid-bite. He turned to see a boy, no older than 9, his face smudged with dirt, his oversized hoodie hanging off his small frame like a tent. His hands were trembling, his wide eyes locked on the actor with a mix of fear and desperation. Startled, Keanu lowered the hot dog. "What's wrong?" he asked, his deep voice calm but concerned. The boy hesitated, biting his lip before blurting out, "It's poisoned!" A hush seemed to fall over the bustling street. Passers-by slowed, their curiosity piqued as the boy's words lingered in the icy air. "Poisoned?" Keanu repeated, his brows knitting together. "How do you know that?" The boy's shoulders slumped, his gaze darting nervously to the vendor. I just know, okay? You can't eat it. Please don't." His voice cracked, and something in it, something raw and vulnerable, stirred a deep sense of urgency in Keanu. "Hey, it's all right," Keanu said, crouching to meet the boy's gaze. "Let's figure this out together. What's your name?" "Tyler," the boy whispered. I wasn't lying. I swear." Keanu nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd. People were murmuring, their phones out, likely filming the unusual scene. The vendor was visibly sweating now, his face pale as he stammered, "I don't know what this kid's talking about. My food's clean, man." Keanu straightened up, his calm demeanor unwavering. "It's okay. Let's not jump to conclusions." He handed the hot dog back to the vendor, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a crisp $100 bill. "How about you grab yourself something warm to eat, Tyler? You look like you could use it." But Tyler shook his head fiercely. "I don't want your money. I want you to believe me." His eyes welled up with tears, and his voice broke into a desperate plea. "Please, just listen." The actor paused, his heart sinking at the boy's anguish. "I'm listening," he said gently. "Tell me what's going on." As the boy began to speak, his words came in halting fragments, each one more startling than the last. He spoke of a shadowy figure who paid the vendor in cash earlier that day, whispering something about sending a message. He described watching the exchange from a hidden corner, his stomach growling as he hoped for a scrap of food. "I didn't know what to do," Tyler said, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "But then I saw you, and I thought maybe you'd believe me." Keanu's mind raced. Was this a frightened child spinning a wild tale, or was there more to the story? He decided to trust his instincts, the same instincts that had always guided him to help others, even when it meant putting himself on the line. "Come with me," he said, extending his hand. Tyler hesitated, his small, dirty hand hovering uncertainly before finally grasping Keanu's. Together, they walked toward a nearby diner, where the actor hoped to get to the bottom of this mysterious warning. But the story didn't end there. As they sat in the warm glow of the diner, sipping hot chocolate, Tyler began to open up about his life, a life marked by loss, loneliness, and the cruel indifference of the streets. He spoke of his mother, who had disappeared years ago, and the men who sometimes whispered strange things about her when they thought he couldn't hear. And just as Keanu started to piece together a startling connection between Tyler's story and his own past, the diner door swung open with a jingle of bells. A man in a black coat stepped in, his piercing gaze sweeping the room. Tyler froze, his hand gripping Keanu's arm so tightly it left marks. "That's him," the boy whispered, his voice trembling. "The one I saw talking to the vendor." Keanu turned, his jaw tightening as he met the stranger's cold stare. Suddenly, this wasn't just about a hot dog. This was bigger, much bigger. And it was clear that Tyler wasn't safe. Keanu's sharp instincts kicked in as the man in the black coat locked eyes with him. There was an unspoken tension, a heavy, almost suffocating atmosphere, as if the diner itself was holding its breath. Feeling in the air made every muscle in Keanu's body tense. Tyler clung to his arm like a lifeline, his small fingers trembling as if they were holding on for dear life. The stranger didn't move at first, simply standing in the doorway with a faint smirk that sent a chill down Keanu's spine. "Tyler," Keanu said softly, never breaking his gaze from the man. "Stay close to me. You're safe, I promise." The boy didn't respond, but his grip tightened, his body half hidden behind Keanu. The actor's mind raced, trying to figure out what to do next. Should he confront the man? Call the police? He couldn't risk putting Tyler in more danger. He glanced around the diner, noting the nervous expressions of the other patrons. They knew something wasn't right, but no one dared to intervene. The man finally took a step forward, his boots clicking against the tile floor with deliberate slowness. Well, he drawled, his voice low and smooth. "This is an interesting twist. Didn't expect to find you here, Reeves." Keanu's heart sank. This wasn't just about Tyler. This man knew who he was. But how? And why? "Leave the kid alone," Keanu said firmly, his voice calm but with an edge that left no room for argument. The man chuckled, a cold, hollow sound that made Tyler shiver. "Oh, I'm not here for the kid," he said, his eyes flicking to Tyler for just a moment before settling back on Keanu. "He's just collateral. But you've got something I need." Keanu's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do," the man replied, his smirk widening. "Let's not play games. You know the kind of power you hold, the influence, the connections. All I need is a little favor, and if you're smart, you'll agree." Keanu's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and anger. What was this man after? And what did it have to do with Tyler? He looked down at the boy, who was staring up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. Whatever was happening, Keanu knew one thing for certain: he had to protect Tyler at all costs. "I don't owe you anything," Keanu said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "And you're not getting anywhere near this kid." The man's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. "Pity," he said, taking another step forward. "I thought we could do this the easy way." In a split second, the man reached into his coat, and Keanu's heart nearly stopped. But before he could react, the diner door burst open again, and two men in police uniforms stormed in, their guns drawn. "Hands where we can see them!" one of the officers barked, his voice sharp and commanding. The man in the black coat froze, his expression darkening as he slowly raised his hands. Keanu exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, his arm instinctively wrapping around Tyler to shield him. The officers quickly subdued the man, handcuffing him and leading him out of the diner. As they passed by, one of the officers paused to look at Keanu. "We've been looking for this guy for weeks," he said. "Looks like you just helped us catch a dangerous criminal." Keanu nodded, still trying to process everything that had just happened. "Glad I could help," he said, his voice quiet. But as he looked down at Tyler, he realized that the danger wasn't over yet. The boy was still shaking, his face pale and his eyes filled with fear. "You're safe now," Keanu said gently, kneeling down to meet Tyler's gaze. "I promise, no one's going to hurt you." But Tyler didn't look convinced. "They'll come back," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "They always come back." Keanu's heart broke at the words. This wasn't just about one man in a diner. There was something much bigger at play, something that had been haunting this boy for far too long. And Keanu knew, deep down, that he couldn't walk away. Tyler needed him. More than that, he needed someone to believe in him, to fight for him, to show him that he wasn't alone. "Not this time," Keanu said firmly, his voice filled with quiet determination. "They won't come back. Not while I'm here." For the first time, Tyler's expression softened, a flicker of hope breaking through the fear. And in that moment, Keanu made a silent vow. He would do whatever it took to protect this boy, to give him the life he deserved, no matter what it cost. But as they left the diner and stepped back into the cold night, a question lingered in Keanu's mind, a question that refused to be ignored. Who was Tyler, really? And what secrets was he hiding? As the night deepened, Keanu and Tyler made their way through the winding streets of New York. The cold air bit at their faces, but Tyler's small hand in Keanu's grip reminded him of the urgency of their situation. Keanu's mind was clouded with thoughts of what they might face next. But one thing was certain: this boy's life had been riddled with heartbreak and danger, and there was no way Keanu would let him slip through the cracks. When they finally reached Sandra Bullock's brownstone, the windows glowed warmly against the frosty night. Keanu knocked gently, and moments later, the door swung open. Sandra stood there in a casual sweater and jeans, her face lighting up in surprise and concern. Sandra's face lit up with surprise and concern as she saw the boy hiding behind Keanu. "Come in," she said quickly, stepping aside. "You both look frozen." Keanu guided Tyler inside, the warmth of the house wrapping around them like a protective cocoon. Sandra crouched to Tyler's level, her kind eyes searching his face. "Hi there," she said softly. "I'm Sandra. You must be Tyler." The boy nodded shyly, staying close to Keanu's side. Sandra gave him a gentle smile and said, "I made some hot chocolate. Would you like a cup?" Tyler hesitated, glancing at Keanu for reassurance. When Keanu nodded, Tyler whispered, "Yes, please." As Sandra disappeared into the kitchen, Keanu helped Tyler remove his coat and settled him on the couch. The boy looked so small, so fragile, and yet there was a quiet strength in his eyes that tugged at Keanu's heart. "Do you trust her?" Tyler asked suddenly, his voice barely audible. "With my life," Keanu replied without hesitation. "Sandra's one of the best people I know." Tyler seemed to take comfort in that, but the haunted look in his eyes remained. Sandra returned a moment later with 2 steaming mugs of hot cocoa and handed one to Tyler. He took it with both hands, murmuring a quiet, "Thank you." Sandra sat down next to Keanu, her expression serious. "All right, tell me what's going on," she said. "And don't leave anything out." Keanu recounted the events of the night, from the poisoned hot dog to the man in the diner. He explained Tyler's story as best as he could, glancing at the boy occasionally to make sure he was comfortable with what was being shared. When Keanu finished, Sandra leaned back, her brows furrowed in thought. "This isn't just some random coincidence," she said finally. "These people, whoever they are clearly after something. And they think Tyler has it. But I don't," Tyler interjected, his voice trembling. "I don't have anything." Sandra reached over and placed a comforting hand on his knee. "I believe you," she said gently. "But that doesn't mean they'll stop looking. We need to figure out why they think you're important." Keanu nodded. "There's something about his parents, something they were involved in. We need to dig deeper, find out what they left behind." Tyler's hands gripped the mug tightly. "I just want to be left alone," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't ask for any of this." Keanu's chest tightened at the boy's words. "I know, buddy," he said softly. "And I promise we're going to make sure you're safe. But we can't ignore this. We have to face it together." Tyler looked up at him, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. "You don't even know me." Keanu's throat tightened. He thought of his own childhood, the losses he had endured, the times he had wished for someone to reach out and save him. "Because I know what it's like to feel alone," he said quietly. "And no one should have to go through that, not when I can do something about it." The room fell silent, the weight of Keanu's words hanging in the air. Sandra placed a hand on his arm, her eyes filled with understanding. "You've got a good heart," she said softly. Keanu gave her a small, grateful smile before turning back to Tyler. "We'll figure this out," he said firmly. "No matter what it takes." But as the hours ticked by and the house grew quiet, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He stood by the window, staring out into the shadowy street below. Every car that passed, every flicker of movement, sent a spike of unease through him. Whoever these people were, they weren't going to give up easily. And then, just as he was about to turn away, he saw it, a dark figure standing across the street, barely visible in the dim light. Keanu's breath caught, and his hand instinctively reached for the phone in his pocket. But when he looked back, the figure was gone, swallowed by the night. Keanu's heart pounded as he closed the curtain and turned back to the sleeping boy on the couch. Whatever was coming, he knew one thing for certain: he would protect Tyler with everything he had. Because for the first time in years, Keanu felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be, standing between the darkness and someone who needed him most. But the question lingered: how far would the shadows go to reclaim what they had lost? Keanu Reeves stood by the window, his silhouette illuminated by the soft glow of the street lamp outside. His eyes scanned the quiet street, his instincts sharper than ever. The figure he had seen earlier had disappeared into the night, but the uneasy feeling in his chest refused to fade. He turned his gaze back to Tyler, who was curled up on the couch, fast asleep under a thick blanket. Sandra sat nearby, watching Keanu with quiet concern. "What are you thinking?" she asked in a low voice, careful not to wake the boy. Keanu sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "That we're not safe here. Whoever those people are, they're not going to stop until they find him." Sandra nodded, her expression grim. "Then we need to take this to someone who can help. This is bigger than us, Keanu. If those men are part of something organized, we're going to need the authorities." Keanu hesitated. His trust in law enforcement was complicated. He'd seen too many cases where the system failed the people who needed it most. But Sandra was right. This wasn't just about protecting Tyler anymore. They needed answers, and they couldn't do it alone. As if on cue, Tyler stirred awake, his sleepy eyes landing on Keanu. "What's going on?" he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. Keanu crouched beside Tyler, his voice steady. "We're figuring out the next steps, kiddo, but I need you to stay strong, all right? We'll get through this." Tyler nodded, though the fear in his eyes lingered. "They'll find us, won't they?" he whispered. Keanu placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Not if I can help it," he said firmly. Suddenly, a loud knock at the door shattered the stillness of the room. Everyone froze. Sandra's eyes widened, and Tyler's breath hitched as he clutched Keanu's arm. "Stay here," Keanu said in a low voice, motioning for Sandra to keep Tyler close. He moved toward the door, his every step cautious. Peering through the peephole, he felt a wave of relief when he saw a familiar face. "It's okay," Keanu called back, unlocking the door. "It's someone I trust." He opened the door to reveal Lawrence Fishburne, his longtime friend and confidant. Lawrence stepped inside quickly, his presence calm but commanding. "Keanu," he said, his tone serious. "Sandra filled me in. I came as fast as I could." Keanu nodded, shutting the door behind him. "Thanks for coming. I didn't know who else to call." Lawrence's eyes flicked to Tyler, who was watching him warily from the couch. "This must be the boy," he said, his voice softening. "Hey there, kiddo. My name's Lawrence." Tyler gave a small nod but stayed silent, his grip on the blanket tightening. Lawrence turned back to Keanu. "We need to move. I made some calls on the way here, and it sounds like this isn't just a small-time operation. The people after him are connected to a larger network. one that's been involved in some serious criminal activity. Keanu's jaw clenched. What do they want with him? Lawrence hesitated. It's not entirely clear, but from what I've gathered, they believe Tyler's parents had information, something valuable. And now they think Tyler might have it too. Sandra stepped forward, her expression determined. So what's the plan? Lawrence glanced between them. I have a safe house outside the city. It's off the grid, secure. We can lay low there while we figure out our next move. Keanu nodded. All right. Let's get out of here. The group moved quickly, gathering what little they needed. Tyler stayed close to Keanu, his small hand gripping the actor's sleeve as they stepped out into the cold night. Lawrence led the way to an unmarked SUV parked a block away, and soon they were driving through the quiet streets, the city lights fading behind them. The safe house was nestled deep in the woods, a modest cabin surrounded by towering trees. It was quiet, isolated, and felt like a world away from the chaos they'd left behind. Tyler seemed to relax slightly as they settled in, but the tension in the air was palpable. That night, as Tyler slept in one of the cabin's small bedrooms, Keanu and Lawrence sat by the fire discussing their next steps. Sandra joined them, her face etched with concern. We need to find out what these people are looking for, Lawrence said. If we can figure out what Tyler's parents were involved in, we might have a chance at stopping them. Keanu nodded, his gaze distant. And if we can't? Lawrence met his eyes, his expression grim. Then we make sure they never get their hands on him. Suddenly, a faint noise outside caught their attention. Keanu stood, his body tense. Did you hear that? Lawrence grabbed a flashlight and motioned for Keanu to follow. They stepped outside, the cold air biting at their skin. The forest was eerily silent, the only sound the crunch of snow beneath their boots. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Keanu saw it, a flash of movement in the trees. His heart pounded as he turned to Lawrence. We're not alone. Before Lawrence could respond, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, their face obscured by a mask. Keanu stepped forward, his fists clenched. Stay back, he warned. The figure didn't move, but their presence spoke volumes. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. And as Keanu stood there, ready to fight for Tyler's safety, he knew one thing for certain. He would protect that boy with every ounce of strength he had. Because Tyler wasn't just another kid in trouble. He was family now. The cabin fell into a heavy silence as Keanu and Lawrence stared at the masked figure standing at the edge of the trees. Sandra peeked out from the doorway, her face pale with worry, while Tyler remained inside, unaware of the danger lurking outside. Keanu's instincts sharpened as he took a step forward, his voice steady but firm. What do you want? He demanded. The figure remained motionless, then slowly raised a hand, pointing toward the cabin. The boy, a deep, distorted voice replied. Hand him over, and no one gets hurt. Keanu's blood boiled. Not a chance, he said, his voice laced with steel. Lawrence stepped beside him, his flashlight aimed at the figure. You're outnumbered, he said coldly. Walk away while you can. For a tense moment, the figure didn't move. Then, as if in response, shadows emerged from the trees, 2, then 3 more masked figures, surrounding the cabin. Keanu's heart pounded, but he stood his ground. Inside, Tyler peeked through the window, his small frame trembling. He saw the men closing in, and panic filled his eyes. Keanu! He cried out. Hearing Tyler's voice, Keanu turned to Lawrence. Get them inside. Lock the doors. I'll hold them off. You can't fight them alone, Lawrence argued, but Keanu's determined gaze left no room for debate. Go, Keanu said firmly. Protect them. I'll buy you time. Expression silenced him as the masked men advanced. Keanu stepped forward, his stance unyielding. He knew he might not make it out unscathed, but he also knew one thing. No harm would come to Tyler, not while he was alive. The forest echoed with tension as Keanu prepared to fight for the boy who had become his family. The battle was just beginning, but his resolve was unshakable.